This is a Media Lab podcast. Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. So, how are you doing? I think that I very often get my kind of blinders on, and I'm working on this show every week. And in a bit of a scramble, I record these intros and outros and forget that there is a wider world going on around me. And I am a little bit insulated being up here in Canada. You know, the way that the whole COVID-19 response has been handled in the United States is not great. I'm not going to get super political, but it hasn't been great down there from what I can see. And Canada sometimes gets into its little high horse, it steps up onto its little horse and shakes its finger down at the United States. And it's like, how could you do such awful things? But it's not like we're this bastion of doing the right thing all the time. We have our own demons that we need to work through. And actually, especially where I am at, cases are kind of exploding right now in the city that I'm in. So it's definitely not a paradise currently. I just kind of want to make sure that the people that are listening to this are having a good time. I'm hoping that this show creates some sort of distraction for you. If it's a good distraction, that's great, or at least a way for you to engage on something else and not living in a constant state of worry. Let me know if that is you. You can always reach out to me at puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Definitely the way that the world is going. I also need to thank so much the patrons of this show over on Patreon, the people who've decided to donate each and every month. I adore each and every one of you, but in particular, I do like to call out the God That's Good tier. And in particular, thank you to Jack Healy and to Todd Fuller for donating at that level. Just a bit of a programming note here at the very top, which is in some productions of Follies, a misguided notion is that there should be a intermission in this show. I'm very anti-intermission for Follies, but sometimes they do put it in. Most commonly, from what I have seen, they put it after this very song, after Too Many Mornings. So, in a way, we're going to be doing an intermission. There is going to be an episode next week, but I have a special interview lined up with an artist down in California. So hopefully you'll still stick around for that next week, but that's why there won't be a song talked about on next week's episode. This week, I do get to talk about Too Many Mornings, and I'm talking with Mackenzie Horner from the Before the Downbeat podcast, which is a show that talks about musical theater. Each show is a look at a different musical, and they discuss what their favorite songs are from it, which ones do they skip, and should it be something that was revived today? The royal today, not the actual today when, nothing is running. Also, as a slight programming note, there was a couple of moments that for whatever reason, the internet connection between me and Mackenzie kind of got garbled. So it's not awful, but in the very middle, there's going to be a couple of moments where it's going to sound like Mackenzie is shouting at me through a wind tunnel. But it's very, very short amounts of time. All right, let's get to plodding along. Plodding Along is a part of the show where I bring you up to date about what's going on in the plot. So after the showstopper, that is, I'm Still Here, Ben and Sally return to have this tender moment with one another, and Ben confides in Sally that he is finding his life kind of meaningless. She, on the other hand, just wants him to hold her, and then the ghosts of their past, the young Sally slips in between the center of them, and oftentimes young Ben comes on the stage too, as Too Many Mornings is sung between the two present-day Ben and Sally. All right, I'm going to go thank some sponsors, and then when I return, I'll be speaking about Too Many Mornings with Mackenzie Horner. Putting It Together is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This week, we are brought to you by ATB. Interested in making a positive impact on your community? ATB Goodness Grows offers a way for Albertans to help and uplift their community at any time. Through Goodness Grows, Albertans can pay it forward by sharing their acts of goodness and create a chain reaction to inspire others to do the same. Use the hashtag ATB Goodness Grows to follow along, get inspired, and join in. This week we're also sponsored by the Alberta Podcast Network, so let's go and listen to one of our other great shows.
Hi, I'm Chris Phillips. I host a show called Let's Find Out, where we try to have fun learning about history here in Edmonton. We investigate local myths.
Because I think the bridge is so iconic, the fact that they've kind of gone unrecognized. It's a little bit sad.
We do taste tests.
It's such a good color.
Cheers. And right now we're doing a whole season about how humans and nature have shaped each other here in Edmonton.
Grizzly bears used to be largely a prairie species as well.
Find us at letsfindoutpodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Too many mornings, waking and pretending I reach for you. Thousands of mornings, dreaming of my girl.
Mac, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
You are a brand new guest, so I think it's probably a good idea here at the very beginning, maybe to explain who you are and the podcast that you co-host.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm Mackenzie. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. And I went to York University for device theater and directing. And then that's actually where I met my co-host for my podcast, Before the Downbeat, Autumn Smith. She was a MFA directing student, and I was her assistant director. So her and I worked together there, and then we kind of branched out after we left York. Took a few years off because I moved back to Barrie. She moved into Toronto, so we weren't together. And then we got together and decided to make a podcast, which is all about musicals. Every bi-weekly, we do an episode on a particular musical. We'll deep dive into it. We'll do a talk all about the production team, the production history itself, kind of what awards has it won, what was the creation process like, and then we also get into our top 3 songs, what makes them a great song of the show, and then we also get into the songs we either would skip or as directors we would just kind of cut entirely because no musical is perfect, and sometimes he even said that's why he likes musicals is you can go back into them and continually rediscover and rework them. So art is a fluid thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot about musicals, so that's why I brought you onto this show here to help guide the conversation maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions coming from that. Were you always more interested in like the not on stage role, like the directing the creation process, or do you like to do the performance piece as well?
I started out in performance. That's where I got my start. My first show was Oliver back in the day, and then I worked.
In what role?
I was the late orphan. I appeared in 2 scenes of the show.
Gotcha.
I appeared in Food Glorious Food, and then I appeared in the follow-up number Oliver. And then they kicked us off stage, and they actually didn't want to keep us around the rest of the show, so they had us do our bow and intermission. So I got to go home like an extra hour and a half earlier than everybody else. It was great. But yeah, I started there, and then growing up as a kid, I would always direct my friends in shows. My parents actually built me a stage in my room, like this little tiny stage with a little tiny trap door, and I had all my costumes and prop swords and everything. So I would direct my cousins and sisters and friends in productions, or we'd reenact sword fight scenes. And so I always had an inkling that I could take a lead behind the table. And then when I got to York and I was doing performing in device theater, I had an opportunity to step behind the table for a project as the outside eye, because we didn't like the term director. We felt that was too authoritative for devising together as a group, so we used the term outside eye. But basically, you're the director. You're the guy who's making sure it's following the theme or the project's idea. So I sat there and went, oh, I actually like this a lot more. Like, I like being able to control the situation. And then when I look back on my life, I look back and go, oh, well, throughout almost my whole life, I've been watching shows and going, oh, well, I could do it this way, or we could do it that way, and that would make this moment better. So I'm looking back, I'm like, well, I've always had the director's idea in my head. It's just being able now to use it in such fun and interesting ways. It's great. But I still like to perform.
Okay. I mean, going back to the stage that was in your room, I don't know why my mind does these things, but was there like an odd show that you got your cousins and like other people to be in?
Oh,
I'm just
my
imagining
goodness.
like a 10-year-old being like, we should do Equus and like performing that or something like that. But
No, we didn't do any of that. I got them to act out The Princess Bride a lot. I love the
Nice.
sword fights in The Princess Bride. So that was one we used to do. My friends and I, we loved the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights, right, by Mel Brooks. We'd often act out scenes from those movies. That was a great one. Les Mis, we love, because I watched the concert version growing up, where I stood in front of a microphone. So I had a little fake microphone stand that I could prop up in front and perform my heart out. So did that. But yeah, there was no random play I used to do. Growing up as a kid, I was very musically driven. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I got into the Shakespeares, the Marlowes, the Neil Simons, when I started delving a little bit deeper into the world. But growing up, I was much more of a musical kid.
yeah. Well, your influences definitely have a connection with this show, like Princess Bride, this show written by two brothers. So that's kind of cool to see that through line that's going on there. When do you feel like your first introduction to Sondheim was?
Oh, I can tell you. I went and saw a production of West Side Story at Sheridan College in Oakville, which is which is really the big musical theater college/university program that we have in Ontario. And my friend's dad, he was the associate dean of visual arts and graphic arts there. So he brought the whole family out to see West Side Story. So I knew West Side Story, but I didn't fully connect it with Sondheim. But then it was Sweeney Todd, the 2007 film version with Tim Burton.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I saw the trailer for that. And there was the clip of Johnny Depp doing Epiphany in the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, this is interesting. So I went and started Googling, and then I went down the Sweeney Todd rabbit hole watching the Angela Lansbury George Hearn version, and there's the Patti LuPone George Hearn version that I liked. I wasn't a huge fan of the Michael Cimpress Patti LuPone version. That one I never got too into, but I loved all the Sweeney Todd stuff. And then from there, I then continually just branched out. Like I learned, a guy saying "No One Is Alone" at my Kiwanis Music Festival. I bought myself the Finishing the Hat. And also, look, I made a hat book at Chapters. My dad thought I was crazy for buying this giant Bible, but I used to read it every day on the city bus on my way to my co-op in grade 11. I used to read. I didn't know half the music at the time, so I was just reading lyrics. But it was so great. Like you can see, it's very old, dog-eared. It's traveled with me everywhere I've gone.
That is a well-loved book, and that's a good thing.
It is absolutely a well-loved book. I've gone back into it a whole bunch of times for different projects.
You mentioned something here, and I actually don't know 100% if this is a very Canadian thing or not, but you mentioned the Kiwanis Festival.
Yeah.
Which I know very well because I was in school band growing up, so we always played at the Kiwanis Festival and got adjudicated and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a very countrywide thing. I don't know if it is in the U.S. or not, or if it's something different in the U.S.
I think there's something different in the U.S., but I know up here, like we did school band when I was in elementary school because I played the baritone. In the brass section. And then in high school, I was in the school orchestra. So we did kind of the next level up from Kiwanis, which was like Music Fest.
Right.
So we did that in high school, but I still did Kiwanis for singing. So I used to do the two-part competition where I would do an up-tempo and a ballad, and you have to do them back to back with each other. So basically you finish one song, you go do a costume change, and you come back on and perform your other song. So yeah, that year I did Me from Beauty and the Beast, and then I flipped the switch and did No One Is Alone. So two polar, different songs. Mind you, I won first place in that competition, so I was quite happy. So, but yeah, Kiwanis was a great. No bragging at all. But yeah, no, Kiwanis was definitely one of my highlights of me growing up as a theater kid, was getting to do Kiwanis every year. I mean, it was nerve-wracking as heck, but I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Follies, this is me making a bit of a personal judgment, but I don't think it's very often people's first introduction to Stephen Sondheim.
It was not mine.
Yeah. I want to know when you came across Follies.
Okay. So Follies is a Sondheim show. Actually, I'm coming back to now as I'm getting older. But growing up, like I remember reading this chapter as a kid in grade 11 on a school bus. I was kind of flipping through it faster than the other chapters because I was like, I don't know the music. I'm not connecting to what the story is. I would say the first time I really heard anything of it was when I watched Elaine Stritch at Liberty, and she does her "I'm Still Here" and Broadway Baby. Those are the first two songs I ever heard of that show. And then I got to watch the Sondheim birthday celebration on PBS, where Donna Murphy did her Could I Leave You? And then Patty LuPone has a great reaction shot in the background of watching Donna Murphy lose it on stage, which is fantastic. And then the biggest part of Follies I've ever done is when I used Losing My Mind as an inspiration for my own monologue when I was doing my 4th year devised theater piece. And I had to write a breakup monologue. And I actually looked at that and I went, okay, so what did Sondheim do? Because he's very poetic. So it worked well for a monologue. And I went, okay, this is what he did. So I took that inspiration as a liftoff point for that. And then on iTunes, I've watched The Follies in concert, Barbara Cook, Liz Calloway, Elaine Sturridge, Carol Burnett, George Turner, Mandy Patinkin, Daisy Prince, who was Hal Prince's daughter.
So that big concert version. Yeah.
Yes. So I've watched all of that. And we do have Follies scheduled for an upcoming episode on the podcast. It'll be like
nice.
a few seasons down there. We got some other Sondheims we're tackling ahead of it that people are wanting first. Like first season, we did West Side, Merrily, and Company were our first 3. So this season we have Sweeney, I think is the only Sondheim we're doing, because I tried to make I try not to do too many Sondheims in one season because it's really easy to use up all of your Sondheim juice before you get anywhere down the road.
Yeah, do the Frogs next. That's the next one that you have to do.
I actually really like the Frogs. Nathan Lane doing the Frogs recording. I've listened to that. I've actually really enjoyed it, and also because I studied Greek and Roman plays in university in our theater studies history class for our first year. We did it chronologically. So we started with Greek and Romans and we worked our way up to Shakespeare. And that was just year 1. So going back and doing the Frogs, I was I actually get a lot of these interesting little references now.
Once you know some of the Greek playwrights and it all kind of falls into line and it makes sense.
Exactly.
Today, though, we get to talk about the very specific song, Too Many Mornings.
Yes, we do.
This is it's an interesting song in many different ways. And yet at the same time, as I was sharing with you before we pushed record, I don't have a lot of notes for this one like I normally do. So I'm actually excited to maybe delve into it a little bit more and we can kind of analyze this and bring some stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I do, the one thing I always like to do here at the beginning is give credit where credit is due to some of the performers who have been in these roles. So this is a Ben and Sally song, of course. This is them finally professing their love, but maybe Ben not being as truthful as you would want him to be. So the bands that we're talking about this year, in the original Broadway cast, was portrayed by John McMartin. In the 1987 London version, played by Daniel Massey. And then in the 2017 National Theatre version, played by Philip Quast. And then, I like his voice a lot, Philip Quast.
He's my favorite.
In those 3 versions, Sally was portrayed by Dorothy Collins, Julia McKenzie, and Imelda Staunton. I think the first thing that I think we should bring up here, Mac, is that this song originally was not going to be at this point in the show. Correct.
Sondheim makes a note in his book that this was supposed to be an earlier kind of meeting song for them. And then there was 2 cut verses that eventually spun out into The Road You Didn't Take in Buddy's Eyes. Which, it's fascinating, right? And like you can still see the fragments of an earlier version, like especially in Sally's verse. Sally's verse, if you look at it as an earlier part of the show, it works.
Oh, 100%, because she's concerned so much about like her appearance and stuff like that, even in Buddy's Eyes, as we go into that song, even coming out of a little bit of like Don't Look at Me, right? Like she's still commenting on like appearance and like what she looks like, and she's not good enough for Ben, but you did say you loved me one time. So I think there's definitely those traces that you can kind of see.
But it's interesting when you move Sally, like the Sally verse now to this moment in the show, it totally takes on a different meaning of what she's talking about. It becomes, I don't want to say predatory, but it almost becomes like you can see her sitting. She's from Kansas, right? That's where she's from.
Or maybe originally she's from Phoenix now.
Phoenix. Yeah, so you can almost picture her leaving, like going to Phoenix and sitting alone, just formulating this plan that she's now finally getting to act on. And but if you look at it as a later part, it becomes almost like she's built this plan up in her head. Versus if Sally's versus earlier in the show, it becomes like almost an organic thought you go through before you see the person you really like, and you're standing there watching them before you make your move.
Yeah, it definitely brings a level of calculation into Sally, right? Where
It really does.
If this was early, you could maybe see it more as like, oh my gosh, it is Ben, and like we're having this magical moment. Versus like, no, I thought this through. I found you specifically. Like,
yes,
we're layering on all this other stuff of her knowingly going and actually trying to find this.
Exactly.
Now, the other thing, I've said this before in this season, so people are probably getting, they've heard me say this before. I'm a bit of a dummy in many ways, in so many ways, but the biggest one is that oftentimes I take what people sing to be the truth in musicals. So sometimes when I listen to scores the first time, it's like, oh, this is like a nice little love song, and they're professing their love to one another. And even Sondheim writes, like, that's not what this song is supposed to portray. No. Sally absolutely is like in love with Ben, and Ben is like kind of saying the right thing at the right time. And I don't know if he actually believes what he is singing about in this song.
It's almost like a precursor to My Friends and Sweeney Todd, where Sweeney's singing to the Razor, but yet Mrs. Lovett is taking that as he's singing to her.
Right.
It's that same kind of third party ghostly figure not responding.
Talking about ghostly figures, Siri just popped up there for us.
I know, right? Siri, come on now.
I think you're right, though. I think that's a really great call out. I think Follies is actually a real interesting precursor to a lot of different Sondheim shows, but the biggest one for me is that Sondheim would come back to this whole idea of like past selves or like the past influencing your present sort of thing. But very visually obvious what is going on in this show, that there's these two different, the young versions and the present versions of all of our characters.
Absolutely. Like especially if you read his directions in the in the book, he says, as the party continues, Ben becomes stronger and convinces himself that his unhappy marriage has always been shut up by his old feelings for Sally. Moreover, Sally has always believed that her life could have been saved by running off with Ben. In the following song, she thinks he is singing to her, but in fact, he's singing to the young ghost of her.
So there's all these different levels going on, which is why Follies. There's a few other Sondheim shows I could probably put into here, but I think Follies is the best example of needing to see the show rather than experiencing it the first time listening to it. Because even the first time I listened to this, I did not even know that there was younger versions of the characters. Like I didn't actually pick up on that.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I remember re-listening to this again and just listening to the score first. It tricks you because on one hand you're like, oh, he's professing love, but when you actually look at what he's talking about, it's all physical. There's no emotional connection he's making to Sally. It's all just touching and in bed and heads on chest. Like it's all very carnal and lustful. The fact that in the script he talks about before this song, the fact that he's just slept with a younger girl is just basically a conquest. Once again, predatory to him when he's watching this younger ghostly vision of Sally, and he's singing about how he wants to basically wake up with her in bed. And there's this lustful, carnal kind of wanting in him. It's very interesting. And Philip Quast does a great job at this song.
Yeah. You know, that's a great point, because you can compare this song to, and I know that he didn't write the music for this song, but lyrically, it's an interesting comparison to like Maria from West Side Story, which is like,
I was going to say,
Maria is all about like, I know her name, but like, so he does not like go into this idea of like, oh, her lips or her eyes, which a lot of like classical poetry even does when, you know, there's a young lover in love with somebody. There, Tony is talking about like her name brings so much joy to me. Like, it's like, I just love it. And here it's like, you're right. It's a carnal nature. It's not really talking about Sally, the person, or what she does. It's like, I just want you in my bed. Like, that's basically what his thoughts are.
That's exactly it. And I mean, like, I was thinking when I was listening to this, you could almost take this song and transpose it onto the balcony scene of West Side Story. It's interesting. I watched the 3 versions that we're going to be referencing, but I also went and watched other versions as well. There's 2 concert versions. There's one with Maria Friedman, and there's one with Audra McDonald singing. And Audra McDonald, because she's younger, singing this song, it did become like a genuine love song. But when you watch Maria Friedman, who's a little bit older, singing it, it stayed. To be honest, I love seeing Maria Friedman as Sally. I think that would be a great casting bit for her. But like the older version of the song, it becomes this lost love song for Sally. But yeah, when you watch it as younger actors doing it, it does become a genuine love song, like saying, oh, I do want to wake up with you every morning. Like, I spent thousands of mornings just reaching and thinking of you. It becomes very passionate and romantic. But the minute it's older, it's like, oh, what's been going on with you? Like what's happened to you?
Well, let's get into it here then. So this is how the song starts. Ben is the one who starts things off and says, "Too many mornings, waking and pretending I reach for you. Thousands of mornings, dreaming of my girl. All that time wasted, merely passing through. Time I could have spent so content, wasting time with you."
Too many mornings, waking and pretending I reach for you. Thousands of mornings, dreaming of my girl. All that time wasted, merely passing through. Time I could have spent so content, wasting time with you.
So even though, like, again, this is me maybe projecting a little bit too much, but I don't find the Ben character necessarily, except for a couple of instances, I don't find his journey necessarily empathetic to it.
No,
like, he seems like he throws
empathetic.
people under. Yeah, he throws people under the bus. He's an asshole, but
He
he's
is.
also sings so lyrically. Like most of the time when they give him something to sing, it's like, oh, okay, I can see the charmer in you. Like sometimes kind of brings that charm into this character when he sings, especially. So, but anything specific that you want to pull out from this first couple of stanzas?
Well, yeah, just going off what you said about being lyrical, I mean, that almost ties back to what his job was at the UN, where it's almost like a used car salesman, where it's like, you can picture yourself behind this car, can't you? Oh, yes, with those nice lush seats and that nice firm steering wheel and the open road. Within that one verse you read, he uses the word time 3 times right in there. So it's that, once again, getting back to this concept of time in the show and how Ben is continually kind of feeling as though the time is just kind of whizzing by him continually. Like there's that whole thing of him just kind of watching all these ghosts go by, and he even says, and I think it's right after this scene where he goes, it's this place, it's this evoking of time and memory for him, where it's almost like and he talks about how he wishes he could be 25 again. He would give his soul, which he says isn't worth much, to be 25 again. So it's that whole thing of him wanting this younger, like, vibrant version of himself.
I think you're definitely right. I think that very rarely will I say that Sondheim probably did not pick a word very specifically to put into a song. So anytime that you notice a word coming up like more than once, it's like, okay, there's a reason why we're using this word constantly over and over again. And I think time is so fundamental to the Ben character that it's like almost impossible to ignore that, how much he's obsessed with time and him running out of time in many ways.
Yes, that's another big thing. He is facing this problem of, I'm old. And even Phyllis is another character who is once again stuck on time. Like her whole thing of, she even comes at the end saying, I think I'll be dead around 1995. That's too many years of emptiness that I don't want to have. So yeah, like it's fascinating, the whole concept of time in this show, and just how as you get older, time seems to move just that much faster. You're never fully caught up with yourself. You're always just trying just to get a little bit close, trying to do something. There's not enough hours in the day, as we say. As
right.
You know, like as a kid, school seems to go by slow and drag. Like I remember sitting in math class, and it was like an hour and a half long class, and it was like, this is the longest hour and a half of my life. I guarantee if I went and did them now, I'd be like, oh, done. Like I remember going to work on a Monday and thinking, oh, it's Monday, and by the time you get to Friday, it's like, when do we get to Friday already? Like there's like, where does all this time go?
So the next section here goes like this. Ben continues and says, too many mornings, wishing that the room might be filled with you, morning to morning, turning into days. All the days that I thought would never end, all the nights with another day to spend. All those times I'd look up to see Sally standing at the door, Sally moving to the bed, Sally resting in my arms with her head against my head.
Too many mornings, wishing that the room might be filled with you. Morning to morning, turning into days. All the days that I thought would never end. All the nights with
with another day to spend. All those times I'd look up to see Sally standing at the door, Sally moving to the bed, Sally resting in my arms, with her head against my head.
So I think this is definitely going through that time thing. We're talking about days, like the progression of time again, but anything specific from this section that you want to pull out?
Well, I mean, once again, he uses the word time again. So now that's the fourth time the word time is being used in this song. So if we're clocking the amount of times, I've counted it. So we'll get to the end and we'll get our number.
Sure.
But the fact that once again, Sondheim, in this very short song, it's now been 4 times this word time is used, time or times. And once again, it's that physical that he's wanting from Sally, that Sally standing at the door, Sally moving to the bed, Sally resting in my arms with her head against my head. It's very carnal. It's that thing of he's picturing Sally basically coming into his bedroom at night. I guess not Sally coming in and sitting next to me and having a conversation. It's no, we're moving to the bed because we know where this is going to go. It's that physical thing again for Ben. So yeah, I think this is kind of the epitome of this part for Ben, where when you first listen to it, it sounds beautiful and lovely. When you actually hear what he's talking about, it's like, oh, you're just wanting a physical thing with her. You're not wanting any romantic, emotional connection to Sally.
And I think that's also aligned with how there is this like huge sweeping score going on between these, you know what I mean? Which I've always found hilarious once you break it down and know kind of what this song is really about, where there is the trappings of this huge romantic feeling of these characters. So it really does feel like Ben is going through the motions, and the score is supporting him in that. But I think the counterbalance is that, yes, but this is not something that's going to last.
Yeah.
Like we know this is going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, like musically, like this song is fascinating because, I mean, where are my notes here on that? Here we go. So yeah, like the strings, like the violin and like especially when you listen to the 2017 version of Philip Quast and Imelda Staunton, the orchestra is beautiful. The orchestration for that version is my favorite. But yeah, the strings, you give this sweeping, yearning sound that's almost this beautiful kind of, it's that underpin of that, it's that continual reaching for each other. And then you have the brass, which is that very classic, grand, romantic sound that we all kind of associate with that kind of kiss on the beach, that big. I mean, even when like even in Tonight from West Side Story, the balcony scene, it's the brass doing the bum 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 before they launch into Tonight. It's that cue for the audience going, oh, romance. We're about to get this big romantic moment. But then underneath all that, you have the cello and the bass instruments, which come in on Sally's verse, and it's almost predatory again. It's that short dun 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 but almost like Jaws music, where it's like once you start singing, it's like, oh, there's a bit of underscore here. There's like, this is where I can get back to that calculating, which we're going to get into because that's the next verse coming. So we can dive more into that when we get there.
You know, it's just it's interesting, at least in this song. The thing that I noticed is that Ben says Sally's name 3 times, of course, here in succession, like Sally standing, Sally moving, Sally resting. Yes. But outside of the spoken bit that Sally has, I don't think she says Ben's name back to him.
No, she doesn't. You're right. She absolutely doesn't. It's all eyes.
Right. So it's like, she, we'll see here in a moment, but like, he is very much like, I don't know, yes, using her name and allowing her into the fantasy a little bit. And she is like, she's already there. It's because she's thinking about herself. Yeah. What's fascinating, I think, really about this song the most is that because this might be an overgeneralization here, but because I think both of them are narcissists.
Well, they totally are.
Right? They're kind of both playing that. Like, she's only thinking about herself, and he is only kind of thinking about himself. But we're coming at it from 2 different ways. She's only thinking about himself because she thinks that Ben is going to fulfill this need in her. But she's really only thinking about her needs. She's not really thinking about his needs really at all.
Absolutely.
And he is like, absolutely, is like, you're going to, I think maybe this one night stand is going to do something, but I don't really care for you at all.
It's very true. No, that's exactly it. Yeah, like Sally's, I definitely say she's narcissistic. Like, she's like, I feel so bad for Buddy. I love Buddy in the show.
Yeah,
but just the fact
poor
that
fool.
I know, and especially at the end where like she's had her breakdown, you see him doing these exercises with her about like about we're gonna make plans for tomorrow. We have money, we have family, we have each other. Like it's that, and he makes her say it repeatedly to get her back into some form of like sense about her. But yeah, like the fact that like all of this, like once again, she's very self-obsessed. Where it's the whole thing of, yeah, you're right. She never says Ben's name, and even when in the last verse between the two of them, you would sometimes think that it'd be like Sally brackets Ben standing there, so she would say Ben and he would say Sally.
She's literally talking to herself in the third person. She's become the Rock by the end of this song, which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Another narcissistic character, if one wants to break it down. Well, let's get into Sally's portion here. So she has a statement, right, and says, "If you don't kiss me, Ben, I think I'm going to die." And then she starts to sing, "How I planned what I'd wear tonight, and when should I get here? How should I find you? Where I'd stand, what I'd say in case you didn't remember, how I'd remind you. You remembered, and my fears were wrong. Was it ever real? Did I ever love you this much? Did we ever feel so happy then?"
If you don't kiss me, Ben, I think I'm gonna die.
What I'd wear tonight, and when should I get here? How should I find you? Where I'd stand, what I'd say in case you didn't remember, how I'd remind you. You remembered, and my fears were wrong. Was it ever real? Did I ever love you this much? Did we ever feel so happy then?
So I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about is just her that first statement she has. And that song, Ben, I think I need you to kiss me. Why don't you bring up how this is sometimes staged?
Sure, yeah, okay. So reading the different directions and watching different versions of this, you either have a choice as a director of, do we make Ben and Sally kiss right after this line, or do we hold out on the kiss and wait until the end of the song? So if you watch the 2017 version with Imelda and Philip, they hold the kiss to the end. If you watch the 1987 London version with Julia McKenzie, right?
Yes, Julia McKenzie,
Yeah, so if you watch that version, they kiss right after this line, and it is a very passionate, romantic kiss. So the minute you put a kiss anywhere, it affects the rest of where this song goes. Because if you have the kiss first, right after this line, then Sally's verse becomes less calculating and more that now she's talking to Ben directly, because now they're in each other's arms, and she's doing that, oh, how I imagined this, and then the questions at the end of, was it ever real? Did I ever love you this much? It's now them in the arms, and it's a very passionate verse versus when you watch the Imelda version, and she's across the stage from him, and he's moving around behind the chairs. It now becomes an internal monologue where she's now, once again, we talked about earlier, it's like predatory calculating thing of her basically building herself up.
Yeah, to throw it into the bus a little bit, I definitely have my own preference to this. But if you were the director, what would you do?
I'd have the kiss at the end. I think it works better there, because the minute you put the kiss too early, unless you're going to put an intermission after this song, which I assume we're going to talk about eventually, because this is the spot in the show where directors have put the end of the act. So, I mean, if you are going to put it earlier, then at least the kiss sets up this idea in the audience's head of, I know where this is going. This is going to be, Act 2 is now going to be them getting out of their marriages and running off together. And the passion of the last verse of the last part of the song that they kissed is now built into this idea of, they're together, they're connected, they're passionate about each other. When you put the song kiss at the end of the song, which I think works better, and also the fact you take out the interval, because this is a show that's better just run straight through. Don't let the audience end of the moment. It captures what Ben and Sally are. It's that tentative. And you watch Phil Quast and Imelda Staunton do this kiss. It's very awkward. like between the two of them, like where it's a very awkward, trying to be passionate kiss between the two of them, and it sets up this trepidation that you then have as an audience going, I don't know about these two together. They don't seem to be connected. And it drives that point home that their kiss is being delayed to the end of the song. And then you also get the last few verses where you said Sally is talking about herself, almost like this rock at the end, not connected to Ben, and yet they're kissing. And it's like, oh, this feels kind of weird. If you put it earlier, you're going to have to it changes the way Sally and Ben's relationship feels on stage.
I agree with all of that. If I prefer it happening at the end of the song, just because of that bubbling tension, like I want that to like linger in the air a little bit. And if there is an intermission, then the people who think that this is leading itself into a happy ending, I can just point at them and say, "You stupid idiots! You don't know anything."
Right?
You have no idea.
That's the joy of this show.
Yeah.
People go. It's like Into the Woods. Into the Woods ends on this happily ever after note. People at intermission, everybody's like, "Oh, this is great." I mean, some people still leave the theater and don't come back for act 2. I was at a concert of it.
When I saw Into the Woods the very first time as a teenager, I thought that the intermission literally was the end of the show. I'm like, oh, that was a quick musical. Okay, that was great. That was fun. That was fun. And then there's an entire second act. Like, what are they going to do in the second act? They wrapped everything up.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And that's what Sondheim does great. Is he pulls that fast one on the audience where you think you know where this show's going to go, but you don't, because at the end you watch them, all 4 of these people fall apart, and yet they all leave the same way they came in, but they're same partners, and it's like, oh, what happened here tonight?
I will say that my overall preference is there not to be an intermission at all. I think that Follies kind of needs to be seen all at once. Like it needs to be all the way through that 2.5 hours just to have that final moment be like, oof. So there's a short little section here that I just wanted to pull out by itself where Ben and Sally are kind of singing back to each other. So Ben says, "It was always real." Sally says, "I should have worn green." Ben says, "And I've always loved you this much." Sally says, "I wore green the last time." Ben says, "We can always feel this happy." And Sally says, "The time I was happy."
It was always real.
I should have worn green.
And I've always loved you this
I wore green the
much.
last time.
We can always feel
The time I was happy.
Now, I will say the thing that you will have probably heard after I cut it into the episode, but is not obvious when I just read it out there, is that oftentimes these lines are being sung simultaneously or over top of one another, or interweaving with one another.
Yes.
And I will say, even though I am pretty negative overall on the 1987 London version, I actually like their harmonizations the best on this song out of the 3 versions. I think they actually form really, really nicely.
I agree.
But I want to talk about just this section by itself.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting bridge.
Because it's so bizarre to me, because Sally is still singing about her dress.
Yeah.
She's so concerned about her looks and how she's presenting herself. And Ben is trying to console her. So I don't know. What do you have to say about this? Well, yeah, consoling himself maybe more than anything. Or singing to the younger version behind her back. I was about to say,
sometimes. That's where I think his lines are directed, because if you read, let me put my original script I found of it. Like the original direction of this scene is the fact that both of them are in the younger version's arms. So Sally's with young Ben and Ben is with young Sally.
Right.
And then it's almost that thing of him saying, "It was always real." Like Philip Quast does a great reading of this where he's looking at young Sally and he's trying to convince her of this moment, but yet at the same time, older Sally's also kind of right there close to him, so she's getting in the way of him. So it's a really weird thing. And also the fact that now, doing back to our time count, we now have 2 other times, as we mentioned, by Sally, where she goes, I wore green the last time, the time I was happy. So 2 lines consecutively, once again, Sondheim chose to use the word time. And it's that, once again, that trapped time for her, where she is basically frozen in time, where she thinks she should have worn green, which once again is a very interesting color choice, because usually it's green associated with envy, jealousy, like wanting the green-eyed snake, that type of thing. But yet Imelda Staunton is wearing a green dress in the show. Like when you watch her version, it's like, I should have worn green. It's like, hold on a minute, you are wearing a green. It's a pale green, but it is a green.
Right. You know, the what I think this is a great example of too is how like certain traditions or like superstitions get formed and stuff like that. It's a great example of that. It's like, well, I wore green the last time and something good happened, so I'm always going to wear green this time. It's like,
yes.
We're both from Canada, so we understand at least the culture of hockey is so prevalent here. It's like
absolutely.
The playoff beard, right? We don't shave while we're in the playoffs because probably someone 70 years ago, some French Canadian didn't shave a beard and won a Stanley Cup or something. And so now everybody does it. It's like this weird thing.
Or, I mean, even in the world of theater, we have our superstitions about saying the name of the Scottish play.
Right, yeah.
Which, I mean, for non-Shakespearean people, that's Macbeth. We don't say that name in the theater, ever.
No.
Unless you're performing in the show, then you can say it.
Well, here's how it ends, where they both come together now and sing the kind of the finale. So they both go, "Too many mornings wasted in pretending I reach for you. How many mornings are there still to come? How much time can we hope that there will be? Not much time, but it's time enough for me. If there's time to look up and see Sally standing at the door, Sally moving to the bed, Sally resting in my arms with your head against my head."
Too many mornings wasted in pretending I reach for you.
How many mornings are there still to come? How much time can we hope that there will be? Not much time, but it's time enough for me. If there's time to look up and see Sally standing at the door, Sally moving to the bed, Sally resting in my arms with your head against my
Now, I will say that depending on the version too, they'll flip around. Like the my and your might be sung differently between the two different characters, but in general, that's how it's going to sound as we end off here.
Exactly. But yeah, once again,
where's our time count?
Actually, well, actually, I just found another one. So originally, I had counted 9. We actually have 10 because Staunton uses time in the same phrase twice. Not much time, but it's time enough for me. So time, which is like Staunton. It's like Staunton, you made a choice there to continually accent. So there's 10. So within a 3-verse song, we've had the word time used 10 times.
Yeah. So definitely something like super important. I think they're both so. Well, I mean, Follies, the show is even concerned about the progression of time and going back to the past into the present, and some people being stuck in the past and some people wanting to break free of the past. So there's all these different avenues that they can explore that for sure. The weird thing about this song for me is that as much as there is this subtext, just like listening to it, I just think it's a very pretty song to listen to.
Yes, I remember driving around for work visiting my clients and listening to the album, and especially the Imelda and Philip version. The ending is so gorgeous. Like I remember listening to this going, damn, this would be a great like almost first dance song at a wedding if you take out the subtext, because it's that thing of coming together. It's that love match of each other. But then when you actually listen to it, it's like, oh, maybe not. Don't use this song at a wedding. Wouldn't be such a great idea. But yeah, oh my goodness, like the ending is just so beautiful, especially the first part. The too many mornings wasted in pretending I reach for you. How many mornings are there still to come? It's just so like it pulls at the heartstrings. It's very Romeo and Juliet.
Quick little like side tangent here that I apologize with, but it's one of my favorite things, and maybe this is just like the schadenfreude of my life that I just like seeing the misfortune of others sometimes, is weddings or gatherings where someone plays a song that they don't know the context to, and it's like, why are you playing this? I remember going to a wedding. I will not name names, but I remember going to a wedding where the song that the bride and groom danced to was Every Breath You Take.
Oh,
like, it's a stalker song. Why are you playing? Anyways, I was the only one kind of like, I don't get this. It's like, it's so beautiful. I'm like, but is it? Is it really? Anyways, that's
absolutely. Yeah, it's very tricky, especially with songs, because like there's so much, especially musical theater songs. I love them, but at the same time, trying to find ones that can be used beyond the context of the show and Sondheim is the trickiest one for this, where it's like, it's very hard to do a Sondheim song without having some type of context. Like, I think No One Is Alone is one of his few that are like, oh, we can take this out and use this as a build them up concert. Like, even like Not While I'm Around, you listen to it and it's like, yeah, it's pretty, but there's something a little bit stalkerish and creepy about it too. Like there's something in there. So yeah, Sondheim is very tricky where you can't really pull his songs out of their show and just use them as a nice piece.
Yeah, very rare. I mean, the closest, I guess, here in Follies, I don't think any of the quote unquote character songs are easily pulled out. You can maybe pull out the Broadway Babies and and One More Kiss and that sort of thing. Even though even them, I think there is a kind of a thematic point of where they're happening and what they're commenting on. But you could pull it out, I guess.
You could. Well, I mean, I think the one that's being used most often from Follies that people use a lot in concerts is "I'm Still Here." Right. Particularly women. It's a very strong song. I mean, like Elaine Stritch has done it. They even did it as the finale for that Sondheim concert that Broadway.com just did, where they had everybody singing a verse or like, so I mean, like, that's another one that I think people in Sondheim, like if you read his book, Finishing the Hat, he has so many different versions of this, like of I'm Still Here around. Like he has like a Barbra Streisand version, postcards from the Edge version.
I like how dismissive he is. He's like, other than the ones that I have written for people or for specific performers, all the other ones are bad. So he's like, he comes right down on it. It's like, don't change the lyrics, just use the lyrics as they are. Mac, overall, what do you think about this song? Like, is it one of your favorites? Like, how do you position this in the show?
It's moved up my list. Like if I was doing my podcast and I had to do a top 3 songs from Follies, I would think this maybe would bump off another top 3 choice. Because I mean, like my top 3 have always been the song that Buddy sings. What's it called now?
Buddy's Blues? Or the God Why Don't You Love Me Blues?
Yes, the God Why Don't You Love Me Blues. I love that one. I love Could I Leave You? And Losing My Mind. Those are usually my top 3, but this one's now kind of moved its way up the line, and it may bump Buddy off. Sorry, buddy.
No, sorry, buddy. Now, do you have a favorite recording at all? Whether of the 3 that we're talking about here specifically, or any recording of this song?
Oh, see, I haven't found a version where the Ben and Sally match perfectly. Like I think my perfect pairing would be like a Maria Friedman and a Philip Quast. Those would be the 2 I'd love to see do the song together because I think they match each other better. Like I love Imelda Staunton, don't get me wrong, but I see her much more as a Phyllis than I do as Sally. Like
that's actually I mean, and this, I'm not the first person to bring this up. I also feel the same way with Bernadette's version of Follies, Bernadette Peters' version of Follies. I think she's a better Phyllis than she is a Sally. She can sing the Sally songs, absolutely, and does it beautifully. But in the context of the show, she's very much more a Phyllis.
Well, especially Bernadette. Like you read some of the early reviews where they said she didn't quite hit the frumpiness of Sally yet. And then they moved it down the road to Broadway. They went, okay, now she's figured it out. But like Imelda Staunton, I can much more see her as a Phyllis than a Sally. But I can see Maria Friedman more as a Sally. So I would love to see a Philip Quast and Maria Friedman team up with this. But I love Philip Quast. Like he's my favorite Javert. If you don't know who he is, just go watch the 10th anniversary concert of Les Mis, where he is the epitome of Javert. He is the guy, in my opinion. I've never seen anybody do that part better. So watching him perform another role like this is just so great. He's so
I don't
powerful.
know if anyone can really outshine Russell Crowe.
Oh, Russell Crowe. Gosh, Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Acting wasn't too bad singing wise. We should have just dubbed him.
Yeah, we can jump over that. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This has been great. If people wanted to stay in contact with you, see what you're up to, how can they do so online?
Well, I mean, you can find me at all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. And then if you're looking for the podcast, our podcast, Before the Downbeat, you can find that on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We post pretty much almost every day. If it's an episode week, we'll do fun facts leading up to the episode release. And if it's a promo week, then we'll do some clues leading up to the episode reveal. So you can always have some fun guessing. We just launched season 2 with Fiddler on the Roof. So I don't know when this episode will come out.
This will be a few months from now, or 2
few
or
months
3
from now.
months.
Okay,
probably,
perfect. Perfect. So season 2 will be well underway by that point. We will have gone through the first few, but yeah, we have a lot of great things lined up. We've just done Oliver, which is of Eastwick, Chicago, Hairspray, Camelot, the producers. There's a lot of fun things that have already gone through the season, but yeah, we love it. I mean, I'd love to have you on, Kyle, to come on and do an episode. Maybe we'll have you come on and do one of our Sondheim episodes.
Oh, I'd love it. That'd be great. Excellent. I look forward to it.
Sondheim is by far my favorite composer. Out of all the Broadway composers, Sondheim is number 1 in my opinion. You can't go wrong with him.
Would it be weird if he wasn't, and I decided to make a podcast about my 5th favorite composer?
Every composer deserves a podcast. So I think what you're doing with the Sondheim team, you can go do like a Rodgers and Hammerstein because they have a huge game you can dive into as well.
Not that I have to worry about this for another few years, but that is already in my mind. It's like, when I'm done with this, what do I do after I've gone through every Sondheim song? And if and when he ever releases his last show, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you do. This is by far one of my things I look forward to every week is your episodes. So thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Thank you to the Alberta Podcast Network and to ATB this week. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, an interview with a composer. Just have your instruments in their rest positions. As always, a big thanks to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and to Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.
And then this week we're doing Camelot and Carousel.
Weirdly, I do like Camelot quite a bit, although I always acknowledge that you can tell that they just
I do too.
Ran out of ambition by the end. I'm like, by the way, this is all the rest of the plot that happens, and they kind of wrap up the show.
Yeah. I know that Guinevere song. It's great, but it's like, oh, we just didn't feel like doing another proper part of the story, so we're just gonna fast forward through the actual like really good action sequence.